Welcome to Disability Clinic, where we learn how to learn from everybody. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Van, and we're continuing our conversation with writer and disability rights activist Emily Ladau. As a professional disabled person, Emily teaches people about disability all the time. So I asked her for some advice.
I'm a new faculty member. I literally just started working here last month, but I've been networking. I've been kind of that feisty, new kid on the block, annoying all the older people who've already done a lot of great work. There are disabled faculty at my institution. Some of them are really loud and proud, and some of them are just like, let me do my job. Why are you bugging me about this? Something that's been, emphasized throughout this whole process is we need to have disabled voices driving the curriculum changes. We need to have people from the community saying how things should be framed, how much they want to participate, which is yes, of course, but how do we do that?
The first one is making sure that people really understand the why behind it, because if you don't fully grasp why this is so important, then I think you're less inclined to care about the how. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that offering those foundational education opportunities to really dive into disability, whether it is reading something or watching something or engaging with a smaller group of advocates, is always such a good starting point just to get into the conversation, but not in such an overwhelming way. But then in terms of the broader networking, that's always such a challenging thing, because I think any sector, any field wants people from a particular minority group to come in, give a talk, have a conversation. And then you've been together for an hour, a few hours, a couple of days, whatever the case is. And then you have to take that learning and apply it more broadly. And so many people who are in the process of engaging with the disability community are like, oh, well, I've heard from these 5 advocates, so now I totally get it. I understand.
Yeah.
And they forget that every disabled person is an individual. And then when you start to point that out, they're like, well, then how am I ever going to learn about this? Because there's a billion plus disabled people in the world, and everyone has a different experience and everyone has different opinions, and, no two diagnoses are exactly alike. And so what am I supposed to do? And I think that's where you start to lose people, because it feels overwhelming. So my recommendation is not to look at it as some kind of isolated learning process, not to look at it like a series of webinars or a series of seminars or a couple of books and then you're done and wash your hands of it, but look at it more as this overarching theme that's going to continue throughout your career and throughout your work as a medical practitioner. And then it becomes, I think, less overwhelming and more an ingrained part of what you're doing. And in terms of connecting with people, it's hard because you never want to tokenize anybody, and you especially don't want to take your patients and tokenize them, because when a patient is coming in to talk with you and then they suddenly become the educator, it's a strange dynamic. And I don't mind educating, but I also want to know that the doctor is doing the work outside of that. And so I'm always thinking about how I can point them in the direction of a local disability organization so that they can connect with them, or asking them to listen to a podcast. There's resources out there, and there's local organizations out there, and there's people doing the work out there to begin these conversations. And also, the National Council on Disability is releasing a health equity framework, I believe, as we're having this conversation.
I think I've seen drafts of it.
Yeah. So that in and of itself is a really crucial resource, because it was written with the input of disabled people. So you don't always have to go out and seek disabled people. Sometimes you can seek resources from disabled people, right, and then use that. Yeah, to build on those conversations. So I don't know if I made that more overwhelming or less overwhelming, but suffice it to say that there's plenty out there, and you don't need to feel like you need to do all the learning at once.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. I like that you mentioned kind of getting your foot in the door first and getting kind of buy-in with smaller circles or even individuals who might be key players first, because one, that's much more like manageable, like it seems not as overwhelming. And also like, that's kind of how you authentically build or demonstrate your value, as opposed to trying to make broad sweeping changes or mandates, because not everyone's going to care about what you or I care about so passionately already. It's kind of like it's a lesson in like patience and persistence.
Yeah, I'm a one person at a time kind of advocate. I recognize that people want to make these grand sweeping changes, but if you're not talking to one person, you're probably biting off more than you can chew. And it's okay to focus on a ripple effect rather than a complete ocean wave.
Yeah, I think that's better for like my mental health too. It's just it's okay to not set the bar so unachievably high. You know, you've done so many interviews. You're very eloquent and well-spoken. And I was wondering, is there a question or a topic that you wish you got asked more about?
Oh, that's a good one. This is a tough question to answer because I like to remind people that every issue is a disability issue, because every issue affects disabled people. And so if you are talking about any sort of policy conversation, if you are talking about anything related to pretty much any sector, disability is relevant to the conversation. And so it's not any one question I wish people would ask me. More so, I wish that people would be conscious of the fact that I don't need to be pigeonholed into only talking about certain disability issues. Because yes, I'm disabled. I'm also a whole human being who is disabled, which means that there's a multitude of things that impact my life. You know, when I enter a room somewhere, people look at me and see a disabled person, see a wheelchair user, and don't take into account a more holistic picture of who I am and the other things that I've entered the room with that you may or may not see. And so when people are asking me questions, I wish they would recognize that whole humanity. I know that it seems like maybe I'm dancing around a specific question, but that's because I just don't think there is one specific one. There are topics that I'm passionate about talking about that I don't get to talk about as much. Home and community-based services, for example, is something that I would love to talk about more, but don't get to talk about enough, and something that I benefit from personally. But in terms of broader issues, it's just a matter of asking people to understand that I'm not one-dimensional.
I'm so glad that you got the chance to put that out there, because I've been doing a little stalking and watching a lot of your recent interviews. And, you know, sometimes I can tell like, yeah, like she is on a soapbox about this, like she's really fired up. And then sometimes I can tell like she's had to say this one a lot, or like she gets asked this a lot. And that's not a bad thing. I think that's where I really admire your patience to educate. It's like, you know, everyone kind of learns this at a different stage, whether that's 3 years ago, like me, or, you know, last week, your NPR interview. And it sounds like you just want to be seen for the whole human pizza that you are. Just like,
yeah, it's all about that pizza.
I love your pizza metaphor.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that one was hopefully fun and relatable. I recognize that some people maybe think it's a little silly or childish, but I kind of had fun with it. And I mean, a lot of people like pizza, so it feels pretty relevant to a lot of people.
Yeah, like how are you going to turn your nose at the pizza? What kind of pizza would you be?
Ooh, like an actual pizza? I would be a white pizza with mozzarella cheese and ricotta cheese with spinach and garlic and a little bit of grilled chicken. That was very specific, but also what I had for lunch yesterday. So
great choice. I can see it.
I don't know what all of those toppings represent, but they are delicious.
You don't have to know and you don't have to explain, but I see you.
Now I have to know what kind of pizza you would be, though.
Probably like a standard, maybe thin crust and with stuffed crust pizza,
Ooh,
pepperoni, spinach, and extra saucy.
I'm very into the stuffed crust. That's a good life choice. Yeah. And see, this is the fun stuff. I don't get to talk about it a lot, but I remember I did an interview a while ago, and the interviewer had looked at my Instagram and saw that I had a couple of posts about nail polish.
I saw
earlier
that.
on.
It's with Teal Sherer. I just watched that.
Oh my God, yeah. And I know Teal. Anyway, she works with New Mobility Magazine, which is really great, an outlet for wheelchair users and people with mobility disabilities. And I thought it was just so fun for someone to talk to me about nail polish. Total bummer, my nails are not painted today. But
okay.
I love talking about stuff like that. And I get when you're trying to educate people, you know, I guess they don't need to know about my love of nail polish per se, but also they kind of do, especially in medical professions, because I think I get looked at as a diagnosis so often that people forget that I am also someone who has interests and passions and hobbies and, you know, a family and people that I love and things that I like to do. So it's just a nice thing sometimes to be reminded of humanity. And this is in no way me saying that I want to be separate from my disability. I don't want people to misunderstand. It's that I am a disabled person who likes these things.
What are some things, or like your favorite thing right now that's not really related to disability advocacy?
If this was pre-COVID, my answer would have been theater. I'm very, very slowly venturing back out into the universe. I have some shows on the calendar, hopefully in the coming months. And so
you're in New York.
Yes, I am. I'm a New Yorker, so I take full advantage of it. It's been a little while since I've gotten to see a good Broadway show, but I'm seeing Macbeth. And the cool thing about that, it actually goes back to disability, because the person who is writing the original music for this production is Galen Lee, who is a disabled violinist and musician, and it is incredible. Wow. So it like disability kind of snuck in there.
Isn't it nice to just get carried away chatting about pizza and Broadway? Let us know what type of pizza best represents you in the comments section below. If you enjoyed learning about Emily's interests beyond disability advocacy, hit that like button. In the next part of our conversation, we'll talk about Emily's new book, which I cannot recommend enough. Plus, she gets to ask some of the questions for a change. Subscribe to Disability Clinic for more accessible and entertaining healthcare education, and hit the bell icon to get notified when our next video drops. Until next time, thank you for watching, listening, and learning.